All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. I'm Jenna, and on behalf of Dream Bank, we're thrilled to have you with us for today's event. For those who have attended our virtual or in-person events in the past, welcome back. For anyone that is joining us for the first time, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Dream Bank. Here at American Family Insurance, life's better when you're under our roof because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. That's why we created DreamBank, an inspirational community destination and virtual experience designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. We are on week 2 of the Art of Decluttering series, and today, professional organizer and interior stylist Mary Frost is going to share more about the many styles of organizing. This session will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel, and you can also find part 1 of the series on our YouTube in case you missed that session or you would like to revisit it. And on that note, Mary, thank you for being here. I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jenna. I'm glad to be back with you this week. I just did pop my Instagram handle and a link to my website in the chat, and I'll mention it again at the end. But if you have already found me in one of those places, either through my website or on Instagram, thanks so much. And if you emailed me and I haven't gotten back to you, I will be catching up on my email as well. So this is my website. Hopefully you can see here. I am going to share some slides with you all today, and then we'll be able to get started. So as Jenna mentioned, last week we talked about a lot about decluttering. If you missed it last week, the replay should be in your inbox, and no problem if you haven't watched it yet. I won't be referencing it a ton or anything like that. So you're all good to start from scratch. And if you were with us last week, welcome back. If you weren't, welcome for the first time. So we're going to talk about the many styles of organizing today. And let's see if I'm going to have to. All right. So I wanted to start off really basic with what does being organized even mean? Because I think that everybody kind of has their own definition of what it is. I really think there's a lot of different ways that you can organize. So I wanted to come up with something like very broad that I felt like could kind of encompass all the styles and fit everyone. And I came up with these 3 things that everyone can find what they need. So that feeling of being organized, it's like, okay, when I need something, I know where it is, I go to the right place. If you think about all the things in your home, thinking that like what you actually have serves a purpose for you, like it does something for you. And then the last one, which I think is so important, is that my home works for me and my family. So if you live alone, maybe you're just thinking like, yes, what I've got works for me. But I'm sure many of you probably have a partner, kids, other people who you live with. So just that it works for everybody who's living there. And I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail about these 3. So the first one being everyone can find what they need. Really making sure that that includes, you, maybe your spouse, your kids, grandparents, or anybody else who you're living with. Because I know some people like who are really trying to get organized, it's like they feel like they carry the weight of it, and like they might know where everything is, but you also don't really want to be constantly being asked by other people like, I need this, where'd you put that? Like so it just makes things run a lot smoother when everybody can go about their business and do what they need to do. It also is going to be taking into account like your personal daily rhythms and routines. So when you think about all the things that you're like doing in a day, like even just getting dressed, packing lunches, running out the door with like sports or activities, if you've got kids, they need like their sports bag, their water bottle, like all those different things. Just that like those routines are so much easier when you've got the stuff organized and people know where to go to get what they need. And that's just kind of more like thinking a lot about like when you're leaving your house, because I know that can be like a chaotic time. But then also just the time that you spend together in your home. Even just things like making dinner. Am I always frustrated because I'm constantly like rummaging through the fridge or pantry? Like I don't have the ingredients I need. I don't know all that kind of stuff. So just curious, this is not like anything for me or anybody like to judge, but I just thought it would be fun to take a second to reflect, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how often would you say is it really easy for everyone to find what they need if you're just like thinking about your space right now? So 1, it's like so easy, we're all good, like we've got our stuff organized and people can find it. And then 10 would be like really difficult, like this is kind of always a constant struggle. And obviously you can fall somewhere in between, but just take a moment to kind of think of where you're at, and that might help cue you into like spaces that you might want to start organizing and things like that. And I also think it's kind of fun to see where everybody else is too, and know that you're not alone, because I'm sure somebody else is putting in the same number in the chat as you are.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of numbers kind of all over the board here.
Yeah, and that's great because everybody is in a different spot, and everybody's got their own style of organizing. So hopefully we'll cover that and you kind of feel like where you'll land a little bit more. Moving on to the next one, things have a purpose, or the things I have serve a purpose. So I kind of broke this down because I think when we think of our stuff, obviously there's like the first one, the practical stuff, the necessities, like, we've all got our toothbrush, we've all got food that we need to keep in our kitchen or our fridge or wherever. I put a lawnmower on there, just like things that are those necessities. And a lot of them are going to be similar for all of us. So those have like a very obvious practical purpose, but I don't just mean that like that's all you should have in your home. I think there's definitely value and there's purpose in sentimental or keepsake items, things like photos, baby blankets, other baby keepsakes from your kids, from a loved one who passed away. So all of that kind of stuff kind of falls into that category. And then the third category, since I am in no way trying to be like a minimalist or be one of those people who is, only focused on like the practical or necessary things, like I think it's totally fine. And many of us have those things in our home that it's just cute. We just like it just because. So a lot of times these can be decorative items, collectible items. And I still think like something that you love serves that purpose of like, well, this just makes me happy. So I don't only mean that like by serving a purpose that it has to be something super practical, which is why I also made sure to put a photo in here of just like some really decorative, like cute items. All right, and then the last one I wanted to touch on for like what does being organized even mean, is that your home actually works for you. Like it doesn't feel like the other way around where like, oh, I'm always trying to catch up and like do all this work for my home. So feeling like you can relax in your space, or at least like have your one space for you if you live with other people or you're kind of on an organizing journey and you feel like you have a lot that you want to tackle and organize. I think it really is helpful to just start with having at least one room or one little space that feels really good to you. If you're feeling like you're not constantly overwhelmed with like the upkeep and like cleaning and organizing, constant to-do list running through your head, usually that's a good sign that like your home is functioning the way that it needs to for your lifestyle. And kind of going along with that again, then is number 3. So it fits my lifestyle and what we need, or what we like to do. So things like the everyday tasks of cooking meals or any care tasks, things like that, that's part of your life. Like you can easily do those. And even like leisure activities, I just put an example, like if your family is really big into puzzles, like, okay, you have your puzzle table, you have all your puzzles in a spot, like you feel organized, you feel like it, you have those rhythms that work. And I'm hoping that a lot of people say yes. So you can just put a yes or no or working on it or whatever you want. But in the chat, can you just put and answer this quick question? Is there at least one room or space in your home that feels like this? Like feels like your little sanctuary or your escape, like it feels really good to you. You can relax, unwind. I hope that a lot of you have, even if it's just like a small corner of a room or something that's just for you, I really encourage that as like a starting place. So if you don't have that space yet, and you feel like, oh my gosh, my to-do list is so long, I'm so overwhelmed, I got so much to organize, like really doing something that's gonna make you happy and working on a space that's for you, that's gonna make you feel good, whatever that space might be. All right, and just to kind of conclude with what does being organized mean, I also want to point out that I specifically did not include certain things. So notice that I didn't say like, oh, being organized means that you have to have all matching bins, like everything has to be color coded or something like that. I did not include that everything needs to be labeled, even though as an organizer, I love labels. I do really think that, especially if you're living with others in like a communal space that multiple people are using, they can be really helpful. But also, I live with my husband and, I don't have every little single thing labeled either. So it's not like a must that it only has to work this way if everything's labeled. And then it also doesn't mean that there's never a mess to clean up. So, the whole point of being organized is that so things are easier to clean up when you take them out, but obviously like you want to be living and enjoying your home. Like this is a picture of a kid's craft room. Obviously, they're going to be using it. There's probably going to be messes at some point, but also things have a spot to be put back. So it doesn't mean that your house never gets messy or that things are always perfectly in place, because that's just not real life or realistic. So getting into kind of the organizing styles then, if you're wondering like what are you talking about that there's like actually different styles or different ways, I am going to cover 3 of them. These are not obviously the only ones, and it's kind of a sliding scale, but just to make it easier to define and kind of talk about for like the presentation purpose, I broke it up into a style that I just gave a fun name of Pinterest Perfect. So you might be able to imagine what that kind of entails. Focus on function, or some sort of like in between combination of both. So those are the 3 that I'm going to be going over, starting with the Pinterest Perfect. But real quick, I forgot I added this slide in. Before we break it down, I also want to be really clear that I don't think there's one way to organize. Like, I really don't think there's one right way, because we all are different. We all are in different seasons of life. Like, there's just going to be things that are going to work for you that aren't going to work for others. So there's definitely not one way to organize. And of these kind of styles that I've broken it down into, that one way isn't better or worse than any other either. So I hope, I mean, I know it's kind of a common experience, but if you've felt like you've tried to organize and it just like hasn't worked out for you, a lot of people are like, oh, what's wrong with me? Or why can't I do it this way? But maybe it's just that way didn't work for you. So it's okay. There's no way that's better than another. And then the style that you use might differ depending on the space. And there's a lot of other factors too that we'll get into as well. But which space you're organizing will also like play a big role into maybe how you think about the style that you want to use. So the first one I called Pinterest Perfect is a really big focus on aesthetics. So a lot of times this involves like matching bins. Everything has its own container and own label. You can kind of see an example that I literally pulled from Pinterest. So this kind of look where it's like, yes, it's organized, everything has a place, but there's also a really big focus on how it looks and making it look pretty. And for this style in general, it usually takes more time to set up. So you can imagine just like getting all the right bins and containers and putting everything in it. A lot of times the categories are a lot smaller, like they're not super general. So it takes longer, and it usually also takes more time to maintain or keep up after you've organized it. And this style might be for you and might be for you in some places if you really find value in like, oh, this makes my brain happy. I love looking at it. Like I personally, there's certain spaces where, yes, I would choose this and I love this. So, as long as you find the value in like how much time it does take to set up and maintain, it would be a good fit for you. And just that you have the capacity in your schedule, in the season of life that you're in. So just a couple things to consider with that one. The next one is more of a really focus on function. So everything is still organized, but more than anything, it just needs to work. Like things have to have a place, they need to be easy to put away. And it's less concerned about aesthetics with this style. So you can see even with this like cube shelf, like there's puzzles in a cube, and then there's kind of like kids games in a cube, and it's still got things separated out, but obviously there's not as much that's like matching. You would kind of call this that you can see all the different like labels and things that are open. That's a little bit more like visual clutter. But it works for a lot of people, and it's still organized. And in general, this type of style usually takes less time to set up and maintain, and is a really good fit when you still find the value in organization. Like you want things to have a place, you want things to be easy to access, but you don't want to spend so much time setting it up or maintaining it. And obviously that can depend a lot on like what season of life you're in as well, which we'll get into in a bit. And then the last one is a combination of both. So maybe it just really depends on the space that you're working in. For me, as a personal example, like personally, this isn't my closet, but my closet is like very much color coded, categorized by like what type of clothing, my on my whole dresser, I have like file folded, things like that, because I personally like that level of organization for my clothes, but I don't really have like a set pantry space in our kitchen. We just have like kitchen cupboards that serve as a pantry. It's not like a walk-in pantry or its own separate closet. So like my pantry space is definitely more of like, this is just functional. It's not, I did not make it super aesthetic or pretty. So that's what I mean when I say like it really just depends on the space, that you could use both of these different styles. And then I kind of hinted at this, but there's a lot of other outside factors that will depend on which style might work for you. So we will be diving deeper into those, because there's quite a few things that I think can also influence this, and which you pick. So just by hearing about them, I'm curious, do you feel like you know your style right now, or like what your preference is? So you can pop in the chat, one, if you're more like, no, I really need the aesthetic, like that makes me happy, Pinterest perfect. Two, if you are more focused on function only. You can put a 3 in if you're somewhere in between, some combination of both. And maybe you're still not quite sure, you're figuring it out, you're on your organizing journey. So I put that one as a number 4, and we can kind of see how everybody's feeling and where you're at if you want to put that in the chat. And then Jenna, you can let me know if we've got a mixed bag or what's going on.
Seen a lot of 3s, and a few combos or both. Yeah, a lot of 3s.
Okay. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was also thinking, because I mean, even as an organizer and a person who loves organizing, I'm also that way. So I'm right there with you if you're feeling like a mix. So with that, we'll kind of get into, I think a lot of the reason why we're those combinations, or like we like the Pinterest perfect look, but we also, some areas just need to be functional and that's it, is because there are so many other factors that influence it, like influence your organizing style. So clutter threshold and neurodiversity would be one, and we'll get deeper into these. Clutter threshold was something I mentioned last week, so I'll just, for those of you who weren't here or forgot, each person has their own unique like clutter threshold, or like how much clutter that they can handle while still like feeling like their brain is calm. Everybody is different on this. It's why you might have some people where it's like they have a lot of things out on their bathroom or kitchen counters, and they're perfectly fine with it, and then others who need like a completely clear surface. So that's totally dependent on just individual, how your brain works and how much clutter you can kind of handle, and how much that like stimulation affects you. And then, so that one, and neurodiversity is the first one. Space constraints is another factor, and then time and money. So I'll just get into these 3 and start off with the clutter threshold and neurodiversity. I kind of already mentioned like how much is actually visible or out on your surfaces can play a big role, because obviously if you're somebody who's like, I need everything tucked away, I can't have much on my desk or my kitchen counters or anything at all, then all that stuff is going to like take up your drawer or cabinet space, and then you'll have to like, then you have less to work with in terms of that type of space. Whereas if you are okay keeping more on the counter or more out, then you usually have a little bit more space to work with. So like I said, some people just need totally clear surfaces. Some people in between are like only decorative items. So even in this photo, like I see a lot of decorative items like plants and just all the things that are on that top shelf in this, like for some people, it's like, okay, I can handle like decorations out, but nothing else. And then for others, it's like, no, I need my actual functional things that I'm like using every day to be out. Otherwise, I'm going to forget about them. So like in this case, on the desk, like the computer, the lamp, the cup of like pens and pencils, it's like, well, the pens aren't in a drawer. They're just like right there, easy to grab. So this is where neurodiversity can come in. I've worked with many clients, I know, who have ADHD especially, and all our brains just work differently. And a lot of times, one thing that can happen with ADHD is like, if it's in a drawer or if it's put away, it's like it doesn't exist. And you're like, I can't function without this stuff actually being out. So that is really dependent on each person and how our brains all work differently. And then just to go over like examples again, the big ones are just surface areas. So aside from like a desk area, kitchen and bathroom counters, dressers, like the tops of them, or bookshelves would be spaces where this would play a role. You can also think of it as like if you want those totally clear surfaces, you might be somebody who puts more away in storage, like closets or things like that, rather than others who are like, no, I need, the basket of blankets in my living room so that I can just like grab a blanket quick, or a basket of books, so that I see it and it's out for me. All right, so then the next factor that's really going to influence kind of how you choose to organize this space is just going to be the actual space itself. So space constraints is a big one. Obviously, we want to have the amount of stuff in our space that's like feels good, that actually fits in the space. And this kind of goes back to decluttering too. So let's say that you have decluttered and gone through your stuff and you have, a certain closet that you're working in, and you're trying to get it all to fit in there and realizing like, oh, I still have like too much. There's no way this is all going to go. I kind of mentioned last week, sometimes when it takes multiple rounds of decluttering to get that perfect fit. So just thinking about how much space you actually have, also how many people are in your household. That'll definitely influence it because, with more people comes more stuff. And then just like the individual clutter thresholds of each person in your space. Because you're going to have those spaces that are just for you, but also then like more of those communal spaces where you're kind of gonna have to navigate and maybe compromise on how you organize a space with other people. And I think in general, just for smaller spaces, getting more creative or using a lot of wall space or things like over the door organizers, that's just gonna, that helps maximize your space. But then you also might be like, oh, well, I'm in a small space, but I'm also one of those people that doesn't really like to like see a lot of things out, for my clutter threshold. So that's why I added in here, like your organizing style, like what you prefer, might clash with the actual space that you have available. And kind of having to determine like which one is more important to you. And you can see in this photo, I thought it was a good example of like having, hooks for pet leashes and little mailboxes for mail or papers or other things like that some people might have in a cupboard or a drawer or something else if they have more space. But if you're working in a smaller area, really utilizing wall space can help. It's just finding that balance of how much do I want to put on the wall if like the visual stimulation and clutter tends to bother you. And then the last one, I think we can all relate to these, that are always a factor, it seems like in everything, are time and money. So how much time do you actually have to complete your project? And then not only complete it, but like I said, with the more aesthetic type of organizing, that's going to take more time in the long run too, just to keep up and maintain generally, I would say. So what season of life are you in? I know personally, I'm kind of grappling with this right now as I'm going to welcome my first baby into the world this November. And, I am particular about like my clothes and how things are folded and stuff like that. And I've already started to kind of think about, okay, when I have a newborn and I'm freshly postpartum, like, am I even going to be doing laundry at all? One. And two, like if the laundry is done, am I actually going to be like taking the time to maintain my clothes and everything how I have it now, or I mean, I'm guessing I will probably switch into this different season of life and be really more focused on like feeding myself, my baby, and getting as much sleep as possible. So I think if you're a parent, you can definitely relate to, you know, how kids can change a lot of things with how much time you have. And even if you aren't a parent, but you're like caring for aging parents, or you're in the middle of a really big work project and you just don't have that capacity or don't have as much time or brain space, that can definitely contribute. So definitely keep in mind, you know, what season of life you're in, what's going to work for you. And maybe even if you love the super aesthetic look of things, you're really going to be like more focused on function and just like having things be organized, because that will still help, you know, in your busy season of life, just to have some level of organization, but it might not be, you know, exactly where it could be if you, at a different season of life. And then the other big one is just how much can you invest in supplies for your project? How high of a priority is that? You know, we all have different values with how we spend our money. And I do think, I mean, I personally will say that I find a lot of great organizing products and options at places like Target and Amazon that have more of like mid-range prices compared to something like the Container Store that might be more like of a higher end or an investment. So I think it's definitely possible still to really organize and keep a budget in mind, but obviously where you shop and just how much it matters to you of like having things match is going to um, depend how you organize your space. And then I did just want to mention in there, if maybe your end goal is to have a super aesthetic space for something, but you're in a situation where it's like, well, I already have these bins, or I need to just not invest my money in that supplies right now, you can always, you know, use what you have and make it work and then upgrade over time. So there's no rule that you have to like buy everything all at once and do it big from the start if that's just not a place that you're in. All right. So before we get into some like examples and things like that, I just wanted to see, now that we've gone over kind of the different styles, factors that might affect your decision about which style you want to use for a space that you're trying to organize, if there's any questions about anything that we've talked about so far. And if you put your question in the chat, Jenna can kind of look over it. It's a little easier for her to access the chat, and she can let me know if there's any questions. So we'll just wait a few seconds if you want to think and type something in there. I think last week we took a couple questions in the middle and it worked well rather than having them all like be at the end.
Do you see a few questions? Penny's asking ideas about ways to create hidden available spaces to quickly stash things into that normally live on surfaces in the daily life.
Okay, yeah. So this is a good question. Thanks for asking it. And definitely have like sometimes even just having like a gathering basket. So rather than having stuff that's like, okay, maybe it's a common occurrence that people come in and like drop everything on the kitchen counter. Even if it's not necessarily like organized, like this basket is for your keys and this one's for, you know, your sunglasses and whatever else, even just kind of having that like clutter catcher is what I would call it, of a quick basket, then it's just like one thing on your counter. And then you can kind of get in the habit of going through that stuff, you know, every day or every other day. I've also seen people, if it's in like an entryway, that's more of like a drop zone, but you have multiple people in your house, like maybe each person just kind of has a bin and it's like, okay, this is my bin that I can like throw these things in. Here's my son's, here's my daughter's. And then like again, there's nothing wrong with that because it can just be like a real quick way to clean up. But the maintenance part of that is just making sure then you're like going through those clutter catchers. And it doesn't have to be a basket that's out. I guess it could be like if you just kind of keep one drawer empty in your kitchen, you just know, okay, this is where I just toss things until I have time to go through it every couple days or every week or whatever feels like manageable to you. It could also be if you have like I know cube shelves are really common for storage. I mean, I have mine right behind me. So if you want it to be hidden, getting like a bin that fits in the cube where it's like, okay, everybody, or maybe it's just for you, I don't know. Like I know that I can just like toss what I need to. And yeah, that's what I would call like a clutter catcher that then you can just like go through on a periodic basis.
And then one more, how to organize print photos. If you have any recommendations, she said maybe making photo books.
Yeah, photo books. There's also like little clear cases, and I'll have an example where I go through photos because sometimes if you're in the camp of like, well, I just want a bin of this is my photos from, 2024, and then this one's for 2025, and some people go by year and they're just fine like having it be that organized. If you want to be a little bit more like do more of that micro sorting, there are little like cases that you could get. So maybe there's a lot of different ways you could do photos. You could do like January 2024, February 2024, break it down by month. You could break it down by like event, if there's really big like life events, weddings, different ceremonies, baptisms, like different things like that. So, and you could always do like a combination of those two, where maybe you have like your photos from that year, but then like you also had a big wedding in that year. So like you pull out all the wedding photos separate. So a lot of different ways that I guess I would say you could like categorize your photos. And then yeah, they do make these handy little like clear cases. I think you can get them in 5x7 or 4x6. And those are really easy to then like pop a label on and have kind of like a little file system, I guess, like if you put all those little cases in a bin. Obviously photo books work great too if you just want to be able to easily like flip and see what you've got. So those are a couple options for sure. And I think thank you for those questions. If there'll be some time at the end too. So if you think of something as it comes up, you can always pop it in the chat, or I'll go over a few things at the end as well. But I really think like for me personally, kind of making this all a little bit more real and less theoretical, examples are really helpful. So I put examples, and I'm just going to go through a few. These are areas that I just see that it's like common spaces or tricky spaces that like are frequently asked questions about, or maybe just like the spaces that a lot of us have that we can all relate to. So first one being a pantry example, I kind of mentioned it already in the beginning, but you'll see on the left, I have a little bit more of the like aesthetic Pinterest perfect style. And then on the right-hand side, the photo that's, excuse me, more like functionally focused and just kind of going through exactly what it means for like these certain spaces, or what it could mean, I should say. So if you haven't heard of decanting before, that's just like the organizer's kind of lingo for like if you have a box of cereal that you buy at the store and then you want to decant it and put it into like a glass jar or another type of bin. So oftentimes with the really aesthetic look for pantries, it involves a lot of decanting for many different items like flour, sugar, brown sugar, think of all your different baking stuff, chocolate chips, whatever it is. And then even then like breaking it down into like crackers, and then pretzels go in this container, and my different cereals all have a spot. So usually there's more decanting involved with this type of look, which is also why it is takes longer to maintain, like I said, because then when you think about you're using all this stuff, but then each time you go to the store, and you're like refilling containers and moving things around. So it definitely takes a little bit more time and effort to keep up. And then most things like have separate bins for really, really specific categories. So rather than just like in the right hand example where you would say like, oh, this is a bin of all the snacks, you might have like your own container for like these little bags of popcorn or like whatever it is. So on the other hand, on the really like functionally focused side, that's just more about getting things organized so that they have a place. Usually with this, like a lot of the packaged items are just left as is, just however you get them from your grocery store. And there's a lot more generalized categories for this type of organizing. So like I said, you might see like, okay, this is just a bin of all the snacks, a bin of all the, dinner items or the baking items. It's just like less specific categories. And like I said, neither one is wrong, and they both work and they're both organized. So I just want to reiterate that. For an entryway example, I think a common like thing that comes up is like, oh, what do I do with all the shoes or just all the stuff when people come in the door? So on the left-hand side again is the like more aesthetic, like focused. Each pair of shoes you can see has like a really specific spot. You can see each pair. Oftentimes with this way of organizing, like there's more of an investment in supplies. So some sort of more like specialized shoe rack or shelf. Even, I know for some people seeing like the actual shoes is not ideal. So they make different like shoe cabinets that have like doors on the front or ones that you can pull out so that like it just looks like a cabinet for people who are really like have a low clutter threshold. And then on the other side, we've got a system where each person has their own shoe bin. I would say this system I think is really popular if you have multiple people in your household, especially if you're a parent who has kids. The bins might not match. Everybody might have like their own color or something like that. And obviously with this method, when it's just like, okay, all Mary's shoes are in the purple bin, you can't like see each individual pair. You kind of got to like dig around and grab them. But it's still organized, like each person knows where their shoes go. And I think it's super popular for kids because a lot of kids, it's just easy. It's easy when you say like clean up your shoes, they can just toss them in one place. They don't have to like keep track of like this pair of shoes goes here, etc. So yeah, definitely for kids, a system that I think I've seen work well. That's not to say that other systems don't work for kids, because I know all kids are different, but in general, just makes for really easy cleanup and can still look really nice too, with just kind of having things hidden and tucked away in baskets or bins. And then for like a clothing example, common spaces to work with are like closets, dressers, things like that. So for the Pinterest perfect, like really aesthetic on the left, I have that this is sorted by clothing type and color. I did pull this from Pinterest, so I'm not sure what those are, but let's just say this is a whole drawer dedicated to like long sleeve shirts or something like that. So everything in this drawer is long sleeve shirts, and then they're even sorted by color as well. So clothing type and color, and then file folded so you can see each item again. So you can clearly see like each one of what you have. And this is my personal preference of how I do my dresser. But again, that's not going to work for everybody, or if you just don't, it does take more time, like if you're folding all of your clothes, especially too. Versus on the other side, we've got like just function focused. It's sorted by clothing type. So you can see each bin or each drawer like is dedicated to something, like socks and underwear is one, pants is another, swimsuits is another. But it doesn't necessarily have to be file folded, color folded. Honestly, I've seen a lot of parents move to, especially for their kids' clothing and items, not being folded at all. And there's a bunch of factors. I mean, if your kids are getting dressed on their own or they're learning that independence, I know I've worked with a lot of kids who, they kind of like tear up and tear through their drawers anyway. So it's just like, not worth it to even fold. It's like, as long as they know that their pants are going to be in this pants drawer, like folding it is not worth their time. So that's definitely a call that you can make, maybe a little bit more unconventional, but really realistic for a lot of parents that I work with, just things taking less time. Or if you want your kids to be more involved in like laundry and like helping out, it's really like, I mean, kids are good at sorting, like this is my pants, this is my shirts, so they can help like sort out what the items are and then just be able to like toss them in a drawer. And for some parents, that's really worth it to just kind of have one less thing that they need to do and have something that their kids can be responsible for. So a lot of different little tips on that one. And I will also say that you don't have to have kids to use this method. If you are an adult and like just color coding and doing all of that is not important to you, and you just need to know like my pajamas are all here and my t-shirts are all here, then this can work for anybody. All right, and then my final one for some of these examples, I just listed off a bunch of how it can be. So on the left-hand side is still thinking about more of the aesthetic, like Pinterest perfect version of things. And I like to say that usually these things are more micro sorted, just like with the pantry, like things being split into more specific categories. Usually that's the case with a lot of this type of organization. And then the more more focused on function version, that's a tongue twister, are just going to be like sorted by, rather than having a random bin that has a bunch of papers in it with photos and keepsakes and kids art. Like, it's not like that, but it's organized by, okay, here's my photo bin. Like all my photos go in this bin or these 3 bins, however many you have. Here's my keepsake bin. That's like pictured in the photo here. So some people are fine just having that level of sorted where it's like, okay, I just need my photos in something. I know that's only all photos, and that's enough level of organization. And then for other people, like I mentioned earlier when I was answering that question, for photos, it's going to be more important to sort them out by date or by event or by year, and have them each year be in its own container before you put it in like the photo bin. So a lot of times with micro sorted things, it's like a bin within a bin. Or for kids art, I know somebody was asking about this last week, so I specifically put this picture up because this is what I was talking about, how you can get these plastic file bins and then have folders in there with you know, you can do it by grade, you can do it by what type of project it is. I think most commonly I see people do it by like what grade. And then, you know, have your kid's name on the front of the bin if you have multiple kids as well. So in general, for these all these types of things, same thing with, I didn't mention, like I have wrapping supplies on here. Usually for micro sorted, it's going to be like, you know, you have your wrapping paper in one area, then maybe in a little bin you've got your ribbon, and then another little container you have your tissue paper or whatever it is, and that all fits in something bigger, but it's like organized within the bin rather than you know, for some people all they need is just like, no, I just want a bin, I can throw anything related to wrapping size in it, it doesn't have to be like super separated out or micro sorted like that. So those are some other I think common things that when it comes to organizing, you have to decide what's going to work best for you, and how much time do you have to kind of go through, because especially with like photos or papers or stuff, you know, I know there can be a lot of those and that can be a little bit more time consuming if you're micro sorting. I also want to just mention that done is definitely better than perfect. So if you're in a space, I know we had a lot of people last week saying that they really felt like they wanted to declutter, you know, basically their whole house or multiple spaces. If you're feeling like you've got a long to-do list, I can say one strategy would be that to get it in that functional place, to get it done first, and then it's a lot easier when things at least have a spot and they're organized to a certain degree. Then you can go in and perfect things along the way. Even for me, like I have these little trunks here, and I was just in my bottom one that's all photos, but it's not necessarily like done by year or whatever. I have some sleeves with like different events, but you know, I know that that's a project that I can do on my own at some point, but at least I know like where all my photos are. So once you have a starting place, I would say, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed by having like a long list of things you want to organize, you might find that it's easier to just get something done and somewhat functional first, even if it's not like exactly perfectly aesthetic or pretty or matching or anything like that. And I also want to leave you with some words of encouragement, just like last week. So if you live with others, there might be, you know, disagreements, but just continue to express why organization matters to you and how others in your household can help out. You might have to be open to compromising, especially in communal areas. But like I mentioned before, I cannot stress enough how much I think it matters to make sure that you have a space for yourself that you really love, even if it's just a corner of a room or a room, as like a really great starting point. All right, so I think we're almost out of time here, but I did want to see if there was any questions. I know I saw somebody maybe raised a hand, or I don't know if you were just like relating to something that I said. If there's questions, and if I don't get to your question, I did put it in the chat earlier, but you can always find me on Instagram at Frost Organizing is my handle. That's probably the best place to find me, honestly, other than my email. So like I said, if you've already sent me an email, I'll make sure to get back to you. But feel free to ask me anything in a DM or an email if we run out of time here.
Okay, awesome. We definitely did have some questions come through, so I've been pulling those. The first one is, do you have any tips on deciding what to keep, donate, recycle, repurpose, or toss?
Yeah, I would say if you, that is definitely the best place to start. So that sounds like a lot of decluttering to me. And if you didn't catch last week's, check out the recording, because that one was all about decluttering, and hopefully that will give you some good insights. And if you have like further more specific like individual questions, you can always follow up with me in an email or a DM for sure.
Riley said, congrats on the baby. I also have my first little one coming. I have no idea what will be the best way to organize their closet. Any ideas on what you'll do?
Um, yes, I think I will have their clothes are so tiny that I will have most things in drawers, I would say. In a dresser. It also kind of depends on how much closet space you have. I also think in a closet, having like just a little cube or a little bin for any kids of any age, I always recommend having like this is for them that like too small bin, they've outgrown it. These are clothes for them to grow into. And then some people even do like, these are keepsake clothes or clothes that I need to like pass on to my sister or something like that. So I would say like that system in general for kids is great, because the last thing you want to be doing is having like all these different sizes, especially when they're babies and they're changing sizes so frequently. That you can just like toss it in that appropriate bin and then like deal with it later. Cause I think what happens to a lot of people is like then they're getting their kid dressed and they find a shirt that doesn't work, but they can't like deal with it in the moment. So it goes back in the drawer and then it just like keeps causing the same problem. So I definitely recommend that system of at least like outgrown clothes, because if you have more kids, you probably are going to bin those and like save them for the future maybe. Clothes they've outgrown, clothes that they need to grow into, so maybe it's like the next size up, and then some sort of like other of like whether it's donate or keepsake or like pass on to my friend or whatever it is. So I think that's a really great system to have.
I love that. That's a great recommendation. Another question here is, can you recommend any resources, books, or videos for organization ideas?
Oh gosh. I would say I I personally just I don't know if they're on there anymore, but I love organizing, so I binge watched like all of the stuff on Netflix by The Home Edit, all of the stuff on Netflix by Marie Kondo. She's the Japanese organizer. And I think I've not read any of either of those books, but yeah, they're definitely popular organizers. And even just depending on what city you live in, if you can search on Facebook or Instagram or social media and following your local influencers, you'll find some great tips. There's tons of us out there and we're all sharing different things because different strategies work for everybody. But yeah, social media I think is a great place. Obviously, if you want to follow me, my handle's up here at Frost Organizing. I have not posted a ton recently, but I'm going to get back into it. So those are just a few places that I can think of to start.
Amazing. And of course, DreamBank, we have, our whole selection of videos on YouTube, and we do have quite a few home organization videos and decluttering and maintenance and things like that. So you can definitely check out DreamBank's YouTube channel. We are at time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. But Mary, thank you again for sharing your time and insights with us today. This was super inspiring. And I'm looking forward to meeting back here next week, July 30th, for our last part of the series. It will be about discussing maintaining your space. So this session will focus on setting up organizational systems in your home and ways to keep those systems running smoothly so that you're not in a constant cycle of organizing and reorganizing the same space. But to all who joined us for this session, thank you for being here. You can learn more about DreamBank's free upcoming programming at amfam.com/DreamBank and by connecting with us on our social channels. And if you're interested in revisiting this event or exploring past ones, our YouTube channel is the place to be. On behalf of the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, we look forward to hosting you again soon. See you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.